So in today's video, I'm sharing my thoughts on A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, a collection of novellas set roughly 100 years before the events of the critically acclaimed series A Song of Ice and Fire, and also I did watch the HBO adaptation. I had originally planned to have this video out a few weeks ago to line up better with the show, but hey, life gets in the way sometimes, but better late than never. So to start off, I thought it'd be fun to take you back right to the beginning, where it all began for me. So I read A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin over 10 years ago, which is crazy to stop and think about, but like so many others, I was introduced to this incredible series through the TV show Game of Thrones, when season 1 released in 2011. Yikes, that was a long time ago. I remember picking up the books around the time season 3 was airing in 2013. I was 19 years old at the time and was just immediately gripped and just couldn't get enough of it. So I went on to read all the books from A Game of Thrones to A Dance of Dragons, though it did take me a few years. I love the TV show in its own right, because one, it introduced me to this incredible series, but it was the first fantasy-related media that my family would actually watch with me, because they were never into fantasy. But I think because Game of Thrones was epic and it was dark and gritty, they loved it. So it became an event each and every Sunday when a season was airing. We would all get together, have dinner, and watch each episode as it came out weekly. But the fact that we were all sitting down together to watch something was enough for me. And I miss those days because no other piece of media has come close to that feeling since, or had the same cultural impact, where people that wouldn't typically be interested in a fantasy TV show were tuning in each and every week without fail. And it was everywhere and on everyone's mind. So, despite let's just not talk about the last season and how rushed it was, it doesn't really change how amazing the show was for so many years. But as much as I enjoyed the adaptation, once I got my hands on the books, I loved these so much more, and were just in another league of their own. A Song of Ice and Fire was the first adult fantasy series that I was able to complete from start to finish. And I remember thoroughly enjoying it, with Martin's descriptive prose, captivating characters, and this multiple POV structure to his chapters. Of course, the most important part was those jaw-dropping moments, where I'd have to go back to reread certain sections to make sure I actually understood what had happened. Like, did that just go down? I was definitely one of those people that had my favourite handful of characters, and when I'd finished their chapter, I'd immediately flick through to see how long I had to wait to get back to them. But I did read every single word. However, I was secretly dying just to get back to my favourite characters' chapters. But overall, I remember really enjoying the experience, and it had been like nothing I'd read up until this point. And I know one day I will reread these books, and I'm sure I will appreciate them even more. But I am saving that day in the event that more books in the series are published, but hey, you can't rush George. On that note, I was a bit reticent to put my opinion on the internet, being fairly new to BookTube, but I feel compelled to share because in recent years, there has been so much internet discourse about authors, not just George but others, not finishing their series, and basically people talking shit about an author not finishing or leaving a story uncompleted. And this sentiment really annoys me beyond belief. If you've ever tried to work on anything creative, you know the struggle, especially if you're a perfectionist. And at the end of the day, the author is the one that has to be happy with the final product. And that's all that really matters because it is their story. So we just get to enjoy it. I'm more than happy to be patient and hope the day comes when George R. Martin deems it worthy in his eyes to allow us fans to be able to experience more of Westeros. But we are not owed anything. We can express our critique respectively or share our love for something, but we can't demand more. That's up to the creator to decide if or when we get to read their work. I can't even imagine the amount of pressure George Martin must feel as a creative, but you just gotta let the stories cook and simmer until it's time. We can savor the aroma, have a pre-dinner drink while we wait, but only the man behind the vision knows when the time is right for us to feast. I wouldn't want him to serve us something half-baked or not to his liking. Forgive the terrible food analogy. But the point is, I hope to experience A Song of Ice and Fire in all its glory the way the author intends. But if that day never ends up coming, I am glad I've experienced what this series has to offer thus far. And in the meantime, there are so many books out there to read. more than anyone could ever hope to consume in a lifetime. So there are so many other worlds and stories to explore that when you actually think about it, it's kind of overwhelming. But on a brighter note, I just finished reading A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, a collection of 3 novellas that include The Hedge Knight, The Sworn Sword, and The Mystery Knight. I don't know why I never picked these novellas up previously. I had heard about them, but I just didn't feel compelled previously. But I seriously regret that decision now because I have been sleeping on these stories, as I completely fell in love with these 2 protagonists. Sir Duncan the Tall, or Dunk, is an honourable, honest person who embodies everything a knight should be in this world of deceit, royal plots, rebellion, and tourneys. He seems to bumble into these situations that could have dire consequences for him, but he always comes out the other side trying to do his duty, which is standing up for what is right, which makes him an extremely endearing character. Egg, on the other hand, is clever, quick-witted, and loyal. Despite his lineage, he's not afraid to put in the hard work that is required to be a squire, often going above and beyond in his attempts to assist Dunk. But at the heart of this story is Dunk and Egg's relationship, which is everything, and they make quite the pair. Dunk acts as a protective older brother to Egg, and I loved every moment that Dunk threatened to clout young Egg over the ear, but you know he never actually would, as he cares too much for the boy. Egg, in return, is fond of Dunk and would do anything for him, even putting himself in danger to help him. Amongst all the intrigue of competing in knightly tourneys or stumbling upon plots and royal rebellions, these are stories about unlikely heroes and friendship. I am a sucker for a bloody good underdog story, which is exactly what this is. Dunk is an orphan from Flea Bottom, but has somehow, despite all the odds, become a knight with a Targaryen prince as a squire. This unlikely alliance is strangely wholesome in Martin's otherwise gritty and dangerous world of the Seven Kingdoms. On a side note, I loved the illustrations in this edition by Gary Gianni. They captured each moment perfectly and was a nice accompaniment to George R. Martin's brilliant prose. I struggled to pick a favourite from these 3 stories because I enjoyed all of them, and when I finished, I was 100% craving more adventures of Dunk and Egg, and I honestly would take more from this dynamic duo than going back to the original series at this point. But alas, like I said earlier in my video, one must be patient. Now, that's the book. Let's move on to the show. So the first season of the HBO adaptation following the events of The Hedge Knight, which is the first novella released in February of this year. But now, if you haven't seen it yet, the entire season is now available to stream, and it's definitely binge-worthy, as the episodes are short and sweet, around 30 minutes each, but they pack a serious punch. I am very happy that this show is so book accurate. It lifts dialogue directly off the page, and most importantly, captures the essence of what these stories are all about, and portrays Dunk and Egg exactly how I imagined. It only makes one deviation from the text at the very end, and I am very interested to see how they deal with this going forward, but on the other hand, it also expands certain characters and moments, such as giving Lionel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm, more screen time, as a small example. With adaptations, they always have their differences, because it's just the nature of recreating a story in a different format. However, for me, the most important aspect that differentiates a good from a bad adaptation is not necessarily hitting every plot beat perfectly, but it's how successful it is in capturing the themes and the essence of what makes that book truly special, and remaining true to those characters. I am glad to say that this is where A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms excels. It embodies the humour and endearing nature, especially between the 2 protagonists and their budding relationship as knight and squire. The actors thankfully brought Dunk and Egg to life from page to screen, and you just can't help but root for Dunk. He's just an everyman trying to make his way in a world where all he wants to be is a knight, to live up to those vows and stand by what is right in a world where this isn't always the case. And finding a true knight in Westeros is very hard to come by. I am so excited for the next season, and I would highly recommend, of course, you must read the novellas first. They are a quick read, not being a massive commitment compared to A Song of Ice and Fire, only being roughly 100 to 150 pages each, so they just fly by, and I loved every single second of it. Even though the show is very accurate in bringing text to screen, I hope you read this, especially if you haven't experienced George R.R. Martin's works before, because I love his prose and he's one of my favourite authors, and it's worth experiencing, especially if you love fantasy. So that was my impressions of both the novellas within A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms collection and the HBO TV show. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and I'll catch you on the next adventure.